So how frank, how forthright, or how restricted they were in their conversations?
That you'll have to read the book to find out.
No, but what is your analysis?
I'll give you a few tidbits, maybe, for anybody who doesn't want to read the book or thinks it's too long.
Like in some of the questions, probably they were not very forthcoming. They asked each other, please you speak first.
I think part of the condition in agreeing to write the book or doing this project together is that everybody who watches, Pathan, Special Ops, these kinds of movies and TV shows where there's a lot of perhaps subterfuge, double talk, triple talk, multiple lives. And I said that both of you have served in your country's services at the highest levels. You can speak about the bureaucracy, and I imagine a number of people here can speak about the bureaucracy as well, but you can speak about it really at the highest level, serving your countries in intelligence. At this point, after the Spy Chronicles was published, General Durrani was accused by Pakistan's Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif of treason. He was placed on the exit control list, he was stripped of his pension, and he was detained at home. So he knows the costs of speaking out for peace with India. Dulat Saab would probably tell you through our book that in speaking out for peace with Pakistan and what has happened in Kashmir, that he's also faced consequences. A number of people here understand certain things that are perhaps not often said in public, like who has access in the government, who has promotions, who can speak to people in power, right? Since they faced the blowback of their previous book in 2018, to me, I thought this is a fabulous place to start. At that point, Durrani Saab had fought his case in Pakistan and won. Dulat Saab, I think the chips have fallen where the chips have fallen for Dulat Saab, but both men were ready to tell their stories again. And so I think they have been brutally honest. Honest, as I said yesterday in our launch, honest to the extent that there's enough in this book to offend everybody on all sides of the political spectrum in India and Pakistan multiple times over, because everybody is so honest. I'll give you an example. General Durrani was involved in the militancy in Jammu and Kashmir. And so I asked him, did you think about the Kashmiri Hindus and Kashmiri Sikhs that were living there, the Kashmiri Pandits? And he gives an answer, and you'll have to read the book to find out, but it's an honest answer.
Right.
I asked Dulat Saab about how he sees the political situation when it comes to external affairs, having served with Atal Bihari Vajpayee Saab as his advisor to Kashmir, and how he's seen the BJP transition over time. You'll have to read the book to find out.
Right.
And they're very frank, they're very open, they're very honest.
Both have been contemporaries and both crossed over from one country to other.
Right.
So how difficult or how easy was it for them to head the country's intelligence agency?
So your question is a very good one, and it's in two parts. The first is that in talking about how they had crossed over, we have a chapter in the book called Case Studies in Becoming Indian and Pakistani, right? We know that when somebody is born, they're not born with any kind of identity, right? They're not born Hindu or Muslim. They're not born Indian or Pakistani. They're not born Brahmin or Dalit or Bhumihar, right? They're born crying, right? They're born hungry. Over time, through their parents, through their socialization experiences, they develop a sense of who they've come to be. Durrani Saab was born in India, or what is now in India, and had to cross over into what is Pakistan. Dulat Saab was born in what is now in Pakistan and had to cross over into India. They both remembered what it was like to cross over and their early childhood experiences. So to me, this is a profoundly interesting question because I live in New York, my daughters are here, I'm an American, my wife is an Indian, my children are Indian American. We struggle. If I can speak a little frankly to this audience, this is probably the cream of India, right? The cream of India's bureaucratic class. All of you are at the top of your fields. Where are most of your children? Are they in India? Probably not. Most of your children are in English-speaking countries settled abroad, right? So what does that say about the relationship between language and identity and place? People have to reinvent themselves. People have to come to see themselves in new ways. And considering that both men were born in 1940 and had partition stories, and they crossed over in almost a mirror image, one coming from India to Pakistan, the other going from Pakistan to India. As a psychiatrist, I'm fascinated by life stories, by what makes people tick, what are their motivations. And to me, that's how they start to come to see themselves as Indians or as Pakistanis. And once they develop a sense of who they are as an Indian or a Pakistani, how does that then inform their view of the enemy?
Right.
And so this is a process that we all undergo. It's not a process that we're born with, right? That to me is fascinating.
But there is a difference, just a leading question from that when a person pre-partition crossed over from Pakistan to India and we accepted them, they are doing very well in India, and people who crossed over from India to Pakistan, they are not being trusted or called Muhajirs there. So did it reflect in their conversations? Could you read General Durrani's mind? Was he sometimes not trusted, slighted, anything?
Respectfully, I'd like to give you a counter evidence, which is Pervez Musharraf. Pervez Musharraf was a Muhajir who came from India to Pakistan. Nobody would dispute that he achieved the highest status bureaucratically and professionally in his country. I totally understand that there are these kinds of conflicts between Muhajirs and non-Muhajirs in Pakistan. I think General Durrani would tell you that he comes from a Pashtun family that settled from Kandahar in Afghanistan into kind of the northwestern provinces in India. He comes from a Persian-speaking family that was highly literate, that made its way to India pre-partition. And so he sees himself very much as a Pashtun, but as we say in the book, because of the dominance of Punjab in Pakistan's military, that to really kind of gel with his cadres and his soldiers, that he had to learn Punjabi. And that for him is a really formative experience. And in fact, when the three of us get together, we tend to speak in Punjabi. We joke around, we have our own set of humor. We send each other WhatsApp messages and like songs, ghazals, things like that. But Durrani Saab never thinks of himself as a Muhajir in that way. And he talks about many challenges rising through the bureaucracy in Pakistan, but he wouldn't say that his identity as a Muhajir is something that prevented him from excelling.
Okay. So let me invite two more guests. Mr. Amarjit Sinha is a former IFS officer, and he has served in different capacities in Indian missions around the world, including Algiers, Buenos Aires, Washington DC, Jakarta, Brussels. He has been India's ambassador in Afghanistan. So, welcome.
Anywhere you wish, sir.
Let me also invite General Abhay Krishna. General Krishna has been ADC, a retired officer of Indian Army. He has served as GOC in C of Central Command. He has in fact served three commands: Central Command, Eastern Command, and Southern Western Command. So, and he was commissioned to Indian Army in Rajputa Rifles in 1980. Welcome, General. So let's also discuss some contemporary diplomacy, some contemporary track to diplomacy, which we have been seeing during last 20-30 years, when you were in government, you served. So let me first start with you, sir. So how was it when you were in Afghanistan? So Afghanistan being part of the triumvirate, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. At one point of time, they were almost one country. So how was it serving in Afghanistan and the India-Pakistan axis?
India-Pakistan?
Axis being in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Well, first, congratulations to me. Only as I always could have peeked into the minds of two spies who are very inscrutable, but we don't understand and actually would see through them. For me, of course, I was invited for a dinner. But obviously, as the old saying goes, there are no free lunches or dinner. I was told here I'm supposed to sit and talk to you. And I must admit right in the beginning that I have looked at Pakistan only from the outside. I have never served in Pakistan. But I have read the book.
Thank you very much.
And of course, this I see is a great sequel that you have created. So I'm looking forward to reading this. You see, Pakistan, serving in Afghanistan is a very different experience because when an Afghan looks at the subcontinent, for him historically there was no Pakistan. So he only thinks the dream of or India has a very magical allure for Afghan. No, he thinks that everything across the Durrani or across actually Indus, because till the Indus they claim to be their territory, is the old Hindustan. It was only in 47 that that connection was broken, but emotionally and historically in the memories it has lived, and that of course gives us a great advantage as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And what he alluded to, the historical problems between the Pashtuns and the Punjabis has persisted even today. The issue of the Durrani line, this ethnic divide, and you can see it playing out today even when Taliban, which is as a ruler in Afghanistan only because of Pakistani support and sort of systems, that the relation is not panning out as Pakistanis would have thought. So that, and of course for us also, I think Afghanistan remains an important country, both as a historical neighbor as far as the South Asian Republic, but as or even geopolitically, I feel that in our region, India has always looked at keeping Afghanistan on its side of the balance sheet rather than on the other side. For different reasons, with the historical reasons related to terrorism, related to policy, geopolitics, and competition. So all that has worked in our favor, and I think we have worked on those lines. I don't know if I've answered your question fully.
To some extent, yeah.
But I find it very odd because this setting looks more like first a school get together and really friends and families. So I was quite tempted to even bring my whiskey glass here, but I thought I should not because there was a television camera here.
So since the book talks about the track to diplomacy, the two generals, the two spy masters they wanted to have. So is there any track to diplomacy possible, General, in this situation?
You mean having peace with Pakistan?
Yes.
Now Pakistan, as far as I know, whatever little information I have, and through my experience, Pakistan is just a fodder. Now fodder between whom? Between the Western powers and the Russia-China combined. Because Pakistan is geographically located at such a place that it gives a very good base for the US to counter Iran and to counter China and Russia. Because India has distanced itself, adopting a policy of no binding alliance. So that is why Pakistan is only a fodder. That is why you must have seen that CPEC has not been successful
despite China investing so much of money and trying to reach out to the border port to shorten their export route from South China Sea to Australia into the Indian Ocean, Pacific, they wanted a shortest route, they have not been successful. But because if they are successful, then this base for the US is gone. Because the US is out of Afghanistan now. Iran is a big enemy, or the US is a big enemy of Iran, or whichever you can put, because the trading route of Russia and China is going majorly through that area, Middle East. And therefore, you must have seen that this Israel-Hamas war is gradually extending to include Iran. And I have already said in one of my interviews, which is there on the YouTube, that I anticipate that the next war or the next this type of whatever is happening will happen involving Taiwan and South China Sea. This I have already mentioned in one of my interviews. So as far as Pakistan is concerned, I see Pakistan as just as a fodder. Now, as far as having peace with Pakistan, Pakistan is in no position to have any confrontation with India. They are just not in a position. But it doesn't pay us anything by having a peace with Pakistan, because we have to remain alert and we have to guard our borders even if we have peace with Pakistan. Because we cannot let this border open or leave it open for the migration to take place in large number, as it is generally happening from the Bangladesh side. So therefore, whether we have a peace or we don't have a peace, we have to continue to guard the border. But again, I am being little hospitalian. What actually will help us in the long run, if Pakistan ceases to exist and it gets break into 4 different countries. And you know those countries. Excuse me. So my views are very, very complementarian and very straightforward and very different from all the analysts that they talk about India's and Pakistan relation. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, Afghanistan government, Taliban government is yet to be recognized by even one country in the world. No country has recognized the government in Afghanistan. So you can understand what is the state of Afghanistan today. So therefore, and then we are talking about taking POK and all that. Again, I'll be very, very frank and forthright in saying that we need to be careful in this also. Why do we need POK? For what? But anyway, that has been part of JNK. So, what is your next question?
Next question is, since China is propping up Pakistan, so what strategy should we have to stop this China-Pakistan axis?
We don't need to do anything because the US is already doing it. And that is why the China's, even the basic CPEC has not succeeded. Because they want somehow the US and the China and Russia, they wanted to take away, and that is why Imran Khan, who bent upon totally towards the China and the Russia side, you know what has happened to him?
Yeah.
And the Pakistan army is totally in the control of the US. There is just no doubt about it, and I can say this very openly and frankly.
So there is one more guest we have. Let me invite Mr. Yashovardhan Asad on the panel. He is a former IPS officer. He has been the Intelligence Bureau 1976 batch IPS officer.
Good to see you, sir. Now this is the Xavier's transparent is complete.
Thank you so much for your participation yesterday.
But I'd like to address the question of track. सबसे ज़्यादा सामने पढ़ा है पूरी बुक पे करेंगे पूरा बुक पे कंठस्थ करेंगे and we are more on the peace, like we are not on the conflicts. So what is the way of the peace? See, on track 2, my view is slightly different. That when things are going went between countries, you don't need track 2. There's diplomacy and there's no good normal relationship state to state. So track 2 obviously comes in when you have a problem which you wish to resolve, and obviously you want to keep it out of public eye, because perhaps the resolution or the result is something which you cannot sell publicly to the people. For example, when we had the track 2, during the last 2 governments, including Vajpayee side and Manmohan Singh's government, they were discussing of a final settlement of some individual issues. But that was not something you wanted to talk publicly, because there was a there's a parliamentary resolution which talks about the UK being part of the United India, etc. Today we talk about Akhand Bharat, which of course the general has said that there cannot be Akhand Bharat. And people talking of making, actually these are rhetorical claims that you can get back Pakistan. It's not a Walmart that you go and pick up EOK and bring it home, because you know the territory comes with the people. You have to really think through what exactly you wish to achieve, and you don't want to do something which you will later perhaps regret. But track 2 has had impact, even as late as when our relations have not been the best. Even in 2021, there was a track 2 contact, and it led to a ceasefire between the two. Even when PM Modi was doing everything possible to improve relations with Pakistan, I think the NSAs were meeting in Bangkok. That is also track 2. You just kept it out of the public glare. So you have to. So track 2 will only succeed first if there is a political will to have a solution, which you can then go back to the public and sell. If that will is missing, then of course track 2 doesn't work, or any track will not work. Because then, and if relations are good, just track 1 is required. And of course in India, you see, the danger with speaking about Pakistan is that we have roughly 1.4 billion experts in Pakistan. And that number is growing. So it's always very difficult to say. But as a diplomat, I see because it's one thing to say that Pakistan can disappear, but no nation, in my mind, will disappear. Even Gazans living in a community have not disappeared. So it will not disappear. Do we only see it as India-Pakistan issue, or we see it as a much larger challenge to China? While of course you ask that China is handling well, but all this while even Americans prospered Pakistan in the first phase of our relationship. So it is not going away. There will be some client or the other who will be assisting Pakistan. So I think the best option for us is, if we really want to grow as an unchallenged or emerge as one of the leading powers, that we need to have peace in our own neighborhood. How we get it, I don't know. But you just look around, which are the major superpowers of the world today? Do they have disturbed neighbors? China has settled its borders and issues with at least 9, 10 of its neighbors. US doesn't have a problem with Mexico and Finland. So our pretending that we will be the third superpower with bad relations with all our neighbors, I think we are living in a fool's world. No, we have to untether ourselves. We want to float up. Right now we are anchored to the bottom of the ocean. It's as simple as that. I'm sure this view may be very counterintuitive or not against the normal narrative, but that's a very realistic view. How we do it, we don't know. Unfortunately, what has happened also, that Pakistan is no longer just a foreign policy issue. And I see now that while India used to be a factor in Pakistan elections and politics, today we have made Pakistan a factor in Indian politics and elections. That I think is a self-defeating policy to follow.
What is the reason for that? Why India, if you can answer that, why Pakistan has started figuring in India's elections more than India figuring in Pakistan's elections?
Well, as Amar said, first I'm extremely sorry. Mr. Kumar had invited me for a nice dinner. So I didn't know. I didn't know that we have to work also for us. So I'm very sorry about it. I didn't know. Yes, you asked me a question as to why Pakistan is failing in our
Indian
country's relations. You know, Amar has already said that we have 1.4 billion experts on Pakistan. But when elections come, I think the social media makes it about 2.8 billion. Because the kind of impressions which come on the social media, the incendiary kind of messages and trolls, everyone wants to win the elections. When you're talking about Mangal suits, you're talking about bulldozers. So why can't Pakistan not figure? But you know, I must say that in the context of the book, and I must say that Dr. Neil has done brilliant exercise, brilliant. You know, talks about the psychology of war and peace. And there almost, if you read the book, all these will become clear as to why these things come up. There are portions where he's talking, where he's talked about what do the spooks feel about each other foreign establishments. Yesterday I used the word hasood, you know, cussedness, which Mr. Durrani, General Durrani didn't want to say about the South Bloc. There was an issue on this point when Mr. Dulat says that it is the eyesight which is running the foreign policy. You know, and we all say that. Our generals also say, Amar would also say. And Durrani Saab then says that ये तो ठीक है, हमारे तरफ से तो foreign policy ही चला, foreign establishment ही चलाता है, department को और talks को, उसके पीछे eyesight रहता है. जैसे कि आपके यहाँ foreign establishment चलाता है, लेकिन उसके पीछे NSA रहता है. So you know, given this kind of a feeling against each other, if people want to use Pakistan, why not? See, there are two very important factors I tell you here. The man who was the most practical, I would say, so far was Dr. Farouk. He said, LOC ko ID bana. This was one of the talks. Why the Musharraf talks failed was that, you know, ultimately he said, bhai, आपने जो हमें वादा किया है कि आप आतंकवादी नहीं भेजेंगे वहां से, how certain can we be on that? I mean, that is supposed to be the position, you know. And so today, when in this context, when people are talking about POK living, I asked one general, I had gone to Wellington for some internal security seminar. I said, how do you feel that the defense minister made the statement that we capture POK? He kept quiet. He said, sir, you have to say anything, because then the press people again asked the chief of staff. And he said, if he had ordered, that will march. I mean, there's no talk about it. So, given all this, I mean, it's natural that Pakistan will figure on our election campaign until June 4, and after June 4th,
They will be back to the normal. So, one more thing. Sir, you have been looking after intelligence bureau and internal security. You have also seen Kashmir burning, and you have seen Pakistan's hand into it. So now, what is the possibility of Kashmir post 370 almost returning to normal, or is there still possibility of going back to this system?
see, I am that way not an incurable romantic like Mr. Dulat. I admire him for a lot of things. But I think there are harsh realities in Kashmir. For example, I do think that one of the most important things is the issue about Kashmiri Pandits. I mean, whether you like it or not, people who have been kicked out of that place, how do you have any kind of... See, there are two things. First of all, I think between Kashmir and us only there are a lot of things to settle. To always talk about Pakistan is not really true. You know, Pakistan raises Kashmir everywhere. You know, उनकी रोटी जो है कश्मीर से चलती है, तो वो कश्मीर की बात है. लेकिन हमारी जो व्यवस्था है कश्मीर के साथ, हमारी जो भावनाएं हैं, आज there are about 600 Kashmiris who had come from yesterday's year. They talked about a lot of things, and that's why I again go back to Dr. Neil. when you're talking about the psychology, if you created a wall, I mean, if there is a wall, then it is, India says that जब तक आप आतंकवादी भेजेंगे हम नहीं करेंगे, there is nothing else. The other view is talk. Why not talk? वो दाल भात के बारे में बात करें, हम भुजिया के बारे में बात करें. वो they talk about LOC का trade, हम बात कर रहे हैं, क्या हर्ष क्या है? चना इधर से जा रहा है, उधर से भुजिया आ रहा है, कॉटन उनका फैसलाबाद से आ रहा है. That's all right. In fact, I told Dulat साहब, आप मुझे ट्रैक टू डिप्लोमेसी में क्यों नहीं ले आते? जी यार, मैं 7 बार गया हूँ पाकिस्तान, आप 4 बार गए हैं. So he tells me कि आप क्रिकेट खिलाने जाते हो या काला चश्मा पहन के VIP सिक्योरिटी के लिए आते हो, मैं काम के लिए आता हूँ. मैंने कहा मुझे देख के तो भेज के तो देखो. So unless we improve many things, for example, I think the next thing is that you should have an elections. Today, no BJP candidate is fighting from
The valley.
Kashmir. They should have. They should have. What is the harm? You can test. This is good. Like I feel that even Priyanka Gandhi should have fought from America. Test the waters. That's extremely important.
So before I go the session open for questions, I have a last question to Dr. Neil. Dr. Neil, do you think the book could have been written by somebody from Pakistan or India if he was to be perceived to be a resident of India or Pakistan? Was it possible? Or was it easy for you to be sitting in US and writing the book?
I'd like to reframe your question in a different way.
Yeah.
Which is, I think this book could have only been written by somebody who comes from a post-partition family. So it's not about being a citizen of India or being a citizen of Pakistan. Like my wife will tell you, or my father will tell you, from the moment that I wake up to the moment that I sleep, I'm always thinking about the trauma of partition. And my wife, who, like many of you, is from Bihar, told me that before our marriage, she never thought about Pakistan in the way that in our side of India, in Punjab, we're consumed by it. I mean, it's like dosti nibhani hai, dushmani bhi nibhani hai. Like it's just what we think about all the time, right? Whether it's the food, whether it's the culture, whether it's the language, we have a shared literary tradition. Like there's so much that binds us that I think the horrors of partition were not as visible in other parts of India. And that's why when we talk in the book about the fact that Punjabiyat becomes the glue that brings so many Indians and Pakistanis together, we have a section in the book that I think is, to me, one of my favorite sections, which is everybody here has at least access to 3 languages, right? You have access to English, you have access to Hindi, you probably have access to Maghai or Bhojpuri or something local as well, right? Why are we speaking in English in a formal setting like this? Why aren't we speaking in Hindi, right? Why aren't we speaking in Punjabi? Like, what I found to be most fascinating about our sessions is that when I'm setting up the Zoom, when we're exchanging, Dulat Sahab, ki haal chal hai, sab theek thaak, we speak in Punjabi normally, or we speak in Hindi, right? But the moment it gets into formal negotiations, there's English. And then English imposes a certain degree of emotional distance. But yet, outside of the talks, when people are having drinks, when people are sharing jokes or songs, it goes back into Punjabi or goes back into Hindi. And I thought to myself, well, actually, the hard work of negotiations and peace building is ironically being done after hours in Punjabi or in Hindi. It's not being done in English, which is supposed to be the formal setting of the negotiations. Now, that's a fundamentally psychological question. It's the idea of language, how we see ourselves through identity, and how we feel comfortable speaking to other people who are not us or other in a language that we presume them to be familiar with. So because of that, I think that this book could have, to me, only been written by somebody who understands kind of the trauma, the love-hate relationship of Punjab. Maybe somebody who was Sindhi could have written the book. Maybe somebody who was Kashmiri could have written the book. Maybe somebody who was from East Pakistan in a different time, might have been able to write the book from a Bengali perspective. But unfortunately, both of these men were stuck with me.
Yeah, then Krishna has something for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to end up saying that the threat from Pakistan is not there at all. I am an army officer, I am telling this, let us not get involved by the border threat and all that. So long Pakistan is being ruled by their army, which is funded by US, there is no question of having any peace with Pakistan. Let us not trust them at all, so long it is ruled by their own army. The biggest threat that we have in our country is from man, M-A-N, man. The media, academia and the NGOs. Because they are the ones who are setting very dangerous narratives in this country. It's not Pakistan, it's not China. Somebody maybe from China may be funding like what happened in Tamil Nadu, that copper, if you remember, because China and India were the largest producer and exporter of copper. Then what happened in Tamil Nadu? The NGOs got the agitation done and the copper production was stopped. And then the price of the copper multiplied by 4 times in the next 2 years, and we were nowhere because our production has stopped. So these are the dangers that we are facing, not Pakistan. So let us not get too much fixated with having peace with Pakistan. There is no requirement. We are managing the border extremely well, and so long the Pak army rules that country, there is no point having any understanding or peace. My views may be totally different, but I stick to it.
No, the good news is that
Thank you for sharing your views.
Understand that the biggest challenge to India is internal, and that is man. So I guess government can be perpetually busy with dealing with this element, and we don't have to worry about army. But this is a military view. Abhay, I must disagree with what you have said, because Pakistan military also exactly tells you exactly the same. Because as long as they can control, and like the Indian military would like to control and say, Indian military doesn't want to. Because peace is not only about lack of war at the border. You see, peace is slightly more. And when you talk about regional integration, your growth, your supply chains, because we are trying to analyze it in the old mindset of lack of war being peace.
No kinetic action.
But Neil, I had a question about Mr. Dulat, because this is a sequel. Because I read that and I read with great interest, and I said that both have paid a price for it. But I found that there were, I want to sort of just test my hypothesis. That I found that there was a great asymmetry in the two characters who were talking in that book. First, one was a general, other was a civilian who listens to political orders and he takes orders from the civilian government. One looked at the other, at least Pakistan looked at India as an existential threat. And he ruled over ISI at a time when I think they were still following the policy of 1,000 cuts on India. And his entire career was devoted to weaken India. Not look at India as a friend. His views may have changed post-time. While this was not the case for Mr. Dulat. So he was looking at perhaps more romantically, was reflecting the general impulse of the government and people of India to have better relationship. So I always thought that I could see that conflict coming across in the book, that while they used to talk up to an extent about freely, but at the end Mr. Durrani's default was his official template in that book. So I don't know whether that was your assessment at the reading the book or whether you interacted with them. So that is just a personal curiosity I had.
So it seems like you were reacting to something he just said. Please.
Yeah.
There is a difference, Amar. You see, if you take the case of Mr. Dulat, he's risen beyond his own position. Dulat was there at the worst time in Kashmir. I remember I was in the Joint Intelligence Committee, where the National NSA Secretariat, which has become now, and we were collating all the inputs. it was so horrible for us, even looking at them in the air-conditioned rooms, these reports which were coming from Kashmir. And that man was there since 88, and he only left in 89 March, and again he was sent back in 91. So he suffered all that. A man like Dulat should have been, rabidly anti-Pakistan. But he rose above it. But about General Durrani, I'll say that that man is perhaps the only man who says this, yes, about Kashmir, Dulat is the ultimate. And so Dulat says, yes, okay, about Afghanistan, this man is the best. There's another thing I just want to point out before Neil says that. What General said just now, this is again taken care of in Neil's book. We say, many of us feel that we don't need to interact with Pakistan because we don't need them. We're moved ahead, our economy is 10 times more, like China is 10 times ahead of us, ours. And the conflict, the terror part of it, we can manage, we can handle. And so there's a very important line where it is mentioned, and which I said in the reading yesterday, that the cost of conflict is perhaps cheaper. And that's a very telling statement.
I think there are 2 points that I would answer this question with, which is first, General Durrani says openly in the book that he's actually not against India. It's really fascinating to hear, but he says, we watch Bollywood movies, we listen to their songs, we used to sneak out to watch the films that were being played in the field surreptitiously. Some of your greatest sportsmen come to Pakistan. That there's a real love for Indian culture. In fact, it's seen as indispensable in terms of how they see themselves. And he shows very, I think, generously that we have centuries of shared literary, language, and historical ties, that ultimately we are a similar people. So then I ask him, well, if this is the case, then why is the reaction so reflexively almost anti-Indian? And this answer that he gives is what I understand to be psychologically fascinating. Just as a show of hands here, how many people have served in the bureaucracy? Can you please raise your hands? Yes?
Raise your hand.
Yeah.
All three.
Yeah.
All three.
How many people have been able to take decisions independently that the bureaucracy has not allowed them to take? Raise your hands. Has anybody been able to take decisions independently, freely, So a number of the hands fell down, but some of them still stayed up, right? So psychologically, when we talk about free action, who can take decisions, we tend to think about this from a psychological framework at various levels. I might think I have independence, but then my wife gently nudges me and says, maybe not. Maybe there are other people here who can be an influence on my decision making. But okay, I can bring her along. But then my kids say, well, actually, you remember you promised this or you promised that? Now I have 4 people I have to be involved with, right? So the point being that when we think about decision-making capability in a foreign policy context, who has the liberty to make peace, we have to think about several levels. First, there's the individual level. Then there is the small group level. Who is the bureaucrat responding to in terms of the leader? Then there's the service culture. What has been done? What is the precedent? What are the laws or the policies that have governed this relationship? And then there's the political climate, right? What is the will of the people? Or what is the internal stakeholders that need to be brought along? What are the external stakeholders that have to be brought along? It's telling to me that both men can only talk about peace after they exit the services.
Yes.
In an individual capacity.
Yes.
They cannot talk about peace in the services. Why? because there's a constraint on their behavior. But then we see the cost about talking about peace that they both faced when talking about it in an individual capacity. Other than that, I'm least qualified on this panel to talk about anything of the nuts and bolts. But psychologically, I think this is a perspective that's very valuable to think through.